Obina was supposed to die that rainy night. Bleeding on a deserted road after a brutal attack, he watched helplessly as people ran away in fear. No one wanted to get involved. No one wanted the danger. But one person stayed. A homeless orphan named Chioma. With no family, no home, and barely enough money to feed herself, she risked everything to save a complete stranger. She carried him to the hospital, stayed by his bedside all night, and prayed he would survive. By sunrise, a convoy of luxury cars stormed into the hospital, revealing a shocking truth. The man she saved was the son of one of the richest men in the country. Overnight, Chioma's life changed forever. She received a house, a car, and her own gym. But not everyone was happy. As Obina and Chioma grew closer, hidden enemies began plotting in the shadows. What started as a simple act of kindness soon uncovered betrayal, greed, attempted murder, and a deadly family secret that powerful people would kill to protect. She would soon find herself kidnapped, tied up in a remote forest, and fighting for her life while the people she trusted revealed their true faces. Will Chioma survive? Will Obina uncover the truth before it's too late? And can a homeless heroine and a billionaire's son find love after everything they've been through? Stay tuned because this incredible story is filled with shocking twists, emotional moments, betrayal, danger, and a beautiful love story you won't forget. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next amazing story. Now let's get started. The streets of Lagos never slept. Even before dawn, the city was alive with noise. Vendors pushed carts through narrow roads. Commercial buses honked endlessly. Motorcycle riders zigzagged through traffic while shouting for passengers. For most people, Lagos represented opportunity. For Chioma, it was simply a place to survive. At 25 years old, Chioma had spent most of her life alone. She had no parents, no siblings, no relatives she could call family. The orphanage where she had grown up had closed years earlier due to lack of funding. Since then, she had been forced to fend for herself. Life had never been kind to her, yet somehow she remained kind to others. Every morning before sunrise, Chioma woke up inside an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. The structure had once been a shopping complex before construction stopped years ago. Most people avoided the place, but for Chioma and a few other homeless people it served as shelter. She slept on flattened cardboard boxes covered by an old blanket she had found near a market. It wasn't comfortable, but it was better than sleeping under the rain. That morning, she stretched her muscular arms and sat up. Around her, several homeless men were still asleep. She quietly gathered her few belongings and stepped outside. The cool morning breeze brushed against her dark skin. For a moment, she closed her eyes and enjoyed the peace. Moments like these were rare. Soon the city would become loud again. Chioma headed toward a nearby public tap where she washed her face and hands. As she stared at her reflection in the water, she sighed. Life had changed her. Years of hard labor had transformed her body. Unlike many women her age, Chioma possessed broad shoulders and powerful arms. Her muscles had not come from a gym. They came from carrying cement blocks, lifting bags of rice, unloading trucks, and performing countless difficult jobs just to earn enough money to eat. Many people laughed at her appearance. Some called her man-woman. Others mocked her strength. But Chioma had long stopped caring. Strength was the reason she survived. After washing up, she walked toward a busy market. The market manager often hired laborers to move goods. If she was lucky, she would earn enough money to buy food for the day. By 7 o'clock, she was already hard at work. A trader pointed toward a stack of heavy sacks. "Carry those into the warehouse." Chioma nodded. Within minutes, she lifted a sack that required 2 men to carry. Several people stared. One young laborer shook his head. "I don't know how she does it." Chioma smiled but said nothing. She preferred actions over words. For hours she worked under the hot sun. Sweat poured down her face. Her muscles ached, but she kept going. By afternoon, she had earned enough money for a simple meal. She bought rice and beans from a roadside food vendor. Just as she was about to eat, She noticed an elderly woman sitting nearby. The woman looked hungry, very hungry. Chioma hesitated. Then she divided her food into 2 portions. She handed half to the woman. The old woman stared in surprise. "My daughter, this is your food." Chioma smiled. "Now it's our food." The woman blessed her repeatedly. As Chioma ate, she felt satisfied. She knew what hunger felt like. No one should experience it alone. The day continued much like every other day. Work, heat, exhaustion, survival. As evening approached, dark clouds gathered overhead. Soon thunder rumbled across the sky. People began packing their goods. Rain was coming. Chioma finished her final job and collected her payment. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She started walking toward the abandoned building she called home. The first drops of rain began to fall. Within minutes, the drizzle became a heavy downpour. People rushed for shelter. Cars sped through flooded roads. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement. Chioma pulled her worn jacket tighter around herself and continued walking. She was used to the rain. Life had exposed her to worse things. As she turned onto a quieter road, something felt strange. The area was unusually silent. Then suddenly, bang! A gunshot shattered the night. Chioma froze. Another gunshot followed. Then another. Bang! Bang! People screamed. Pedestrians scattered in every direction. Several vehicles accelerated away from the scene. Fear spread instantly. Chioma's heart pounded. She ducked behind a parked vehicle. A black SUV raced around the corner. The driver appeared to be struggling to control it. Moments later, the vehicle slammed into a roadside barrier with tremendous force. Crash! The sound echoed through the street. Steam rose from the damaged engine. For several seconds, nobody moved. Everyone was afraid. Then Chioma saw something that made her decision instantly. A man had fallen from the driver's side. He was wearing a police uniform, and he was bleeding heavily. The crowd remained frozen. Nobody wanted trouble. Nobody wanted involvement. One man muttered, "Let's go before the shooters come back." Others quickly agreed. Within moments, people began disappearing, running, hiding, escaping. Chioma stared in disbelief. The officer was still alive, yet everyone was leaving him behind. She looked toward the dark road. The attackers could still be nearby. Helping him could be dangerous, very dangerous. But when she looked at the wounded officer again, she saw him weakly raise a hand. "Help!" The word was barely audible. Chioma felt something twist inside her chest. She remembered being abandoned as a child. She remembered nights when nobody helped her. She remembered what it felt like to be alone. Without thinking further, she ran toward him. Rain soaked her clothes instantly. Blood mixed with water on the pavement. The officer was losing consciousness. His breathing had become shallow. Oh no! Chioma quickly examined the wound. A bullet had struck his side. Blood flowed continuously. She needed to stop it. Immediately, looking around, she found nothing useful. Without hesitation, she tore part of her shirt. Ignoring the cold rain and curious stares from a few remaining bystanders, she pressed the fabric firmly against the wound. The officer groaned in pain. "It's okay," she whispered. "Stay with me." His eyes fluttered. "Don't let me die." Chioma shook her head. "You're not dying tonight." She looked around desperately. They needed transportation. Fast. The nearest hospital was several kilometers away. She stepped into the road and began waving at passing vehicles. The first car ignored her. The second sped away. The third never slowed down. Frustration filled her. The officer was running out of time. Finally, an old yellow taxi approached. Chioma stepped directly into its path. The driver slammed on the brakes. "Are you mad?" She pointed toward the officer. "Please help me." The driver followed her gaze. His expression changed immediately. "He's been shot." "I know." The driver hesitated. Getting involved could create problems. Police investigations, dangerous criminals, endless questions. But then he looked at Chioma's desperate face. Slowly he nodded. Let's move him. Relief washed over her. Together, they carefully lifted the wounded officer. Even unconscious, he was heavy. Fortunately, Chioma's strength made the task easier. They managed to place him inside the taxi. Chioma climbed into the back seat beside him. The driver accelerated immediately. Rain hammered against the windshield. Traffic clogged several roads. Every second mattered. Chioma held pressure against the wound while whispering encouragement. Stay alive. The officer's eyes opened briefly. For a moment their gazes met. Why? He whispered weakly. Chioma frowned. Why what? Why are you helping me? She almost laughed. What kind of question was that? Because you're human. Because you're hurt. Because someone needs to help. But instead she simply replied, because it's the right thing to do. The officer gave the faintest smile before losing consciousness again. Fear gripped her. Drive faster. The taxi sped through the rain. Ahead, hospital lights finally appeared. Chioma felt a surge of hope. They weren't safe yet. The officer's life still hung in the balance. But at least now he had a chance. Neither of them knew it. Neither of them could possibly imagine it. But the decision Chioma had made on that rainy night, the choice to help a stranger when everyone else ran away, was about to change her life forever. And by sunrise, the entire course of her future would begin to unfold. The taxi screeched to a stop outside the emergency entrance of St. Mary's Hospital. Before the vehicle had fully stopped moving, Chioma jumped out. Help! Somebody help! Her voice echoed through the rainy night. Several nurses and security guards rushed toward the taxi. The moment they saw the unconscious police officer covered in blood, panic erupted. Get a stretcher. Call the emergency team. Hurry! Within seconds, medical personnel surrounded the vehicle. Chioma stepped aside as doctors carefully transferred the wounded officer onto a stretcher. One of the nurses looked at her. What happened? I found him after someone shot him. The nurse's eyes widened. Did you bring him here? Chioma nodded. The nurse stared at her with admiration. You may have saved his life. The words brought a small amount of comfort. But she wasn't celebrating yet. The officer still looked dangerously pale. The doctors pushed him through double doors and disappeared into the emergency ward. Just like that, he was gone. Chioma suddenly felt exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept her moving began to fade. She realized she was soaked from head to toe. Rainwater dripped from her hair. Her torn shirt was stained with blood. Her hands trembled from fatigue. The taxi driver approached her. You should go home. Chioma glanced toward the emergency doors. What if he needs someone? The driver sighed. You already did more than enough. Maybe he was right. Maybe she should leave. But something wouldn't let her. The officer had looked terrified. The memory of his weak voice replayed in her mind. Don't let me die. She couldn't walk away. Not yet. I'll stay a little longer. The driver shook his head with a smile. You're a good person. He climbed back into his taxi and drove away. Soon Chioma found herself sitting alone in the waiting area. The hospital felt strangely quiet. A television played softly in the corner. A few patients sat nearby. Occasionally nurses hurried through the hallways. But most of the building remained calm. Chioma stared at the emergency doors. Minutes felt like hours. An hour passed. Then another. Nobody came out. Nobody provided updates. The uncertainty was unbearable. Finally, a doctor emerged. Chioma immediately stood. Doctor! The man stopped. Are you family? She hesitated. No. The doctor looked surprised. You've been waiting all this time? Yes. He smiled gently. He's still in surgery. Chioma's heart sank. The surgery was taking longer than expected. That couldn't be good. The doctor seemed to notice her concern. The bullet caused significant internal damage. Will he survive? The doctor paused. We're doing everything we can. Then he walked away. Those words didn't reassure her. If anything, they made her more worried. She sat back down. The night stretched endlessly. As midnight approached, hunger began to gnaw at her stomach. She hadn't eaten since afternoon. but food was the last thing on her mind. A nurse eventually approached carrying a cup of tea and a sandwich. "Here." Chioma looked confused. "What's this?" "You need to eat." The nurse placed the food in her hands. "I can't accept this." The nurse smiled. "You can." Chioma felt tears threatening to form. Very few people showed kindness to homeless strangers. "Thank you." The nurse sat beside her. "My name is Ada. I'm Chioma." Ada studied her carefully. "You really don't know the officer?" "No." "And you're still here?" Chioma nodded. Ada shook her head. "Most people wouldn't do that." Chioma stared at the floor. "Most people wouldn't have helped me either." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Ada quietly asked, "What happened to you?" Chioma rarely discussed her past, but something about Ada felt safe. So she told her about losing her parents, about growing up in an orphanage, about sleeping in abandoned buildings, about surviving one day at a time. When she finished, Ada's eyes were filled with sympathy. "You've been through a lot." Chioma forced a smile. "I'm still standing." Ada squeezed her shoulder. "Yes, you are." The nurse eventually returned to work. Chioma resumed her vigil. Midnight became 1 o'clock. 1 became 2. The hospital grew even quieter. At some point, she began praying. She wasn't particularly religious. Life had made faith complicated. But she found herself whispering anyway. "Please let him live." The words came naturally. She didn't know the officer, didn't know his family, didn't know his name, but she wanted him to survive. Outside, the storm continued. Thunder rumbled across the sky. Rain battered the windows. Inside the operating room, doctors fought to save a life. And in the waiting room, a homeless woman refused to leave. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, another doctor appeared. This time he looked exhausted. Chioma immediately stood again. "Doctor." The surgeon removed his mask. "The bullet has been removed." Hope flickered inside her. "Is he okay?" "We're not sure yet." Her heart dropped again. The doctor continued. "He lost a lot of blood." "What does that mean?" "It means the next few hours are critical." Chioma swallowed hard. The surgeon sighed. "We've done our part." Now all they could do was wait. More waiting. More uncertainty. More fear. Hours crawled by. At one point, Chioma nearly fell asleep in her chair. But every time her eyes closed, she forced herself awake. She didn't know why. She simply couldn't leave. Shortly before dawn, the hospital suddenly became busy. Doctors moved quickly through the halls. Phones rang repeatedly. Several administrators appeared. Something was happening. Chioma watched curiously. A nurse hurried past. "What's going on?" The nurse looked surprised. "You don't know?" "Know what?" "The officer." "What about him?" The nurse lowered her voice. "Apparently he's someone important." Chioma frowned. Important? A few minutes later, she finally learned his name. Officer Obinna Okafor. The name meant nothing to her, but it clearly meant something to everyone else. Hospital staff whispered constantly. Security guards became more alert. Administrators checked their appearance repeatedly. The atmosphere changed completely. Then dawn arrived. Golden sunlight slowly replaced the darkness. The rain stopped, and suddenly the sound of engines filled the air. Lots of engines. Expensive engines. Everyone turned toward the entrance. Even doctors stopped walking. Nurses rushed to the windows. Curiosity spread throughout the hospital. Chioma stood and looked outside. What she saw left her speechless. Luxury vehicles were pouring into the hospital parking lot. 1, 2, 5, 10. More than a dozen black SUVs rolled through the gates. Behind them came several luxury sedans. Armed security personnel stepped out. Men in expensive suits appeared everywhere. The scene looked like the arrival of a president. Hospital workers exchanged shocked looks. "He's here. The chief has arrived." "I can't believe it." Chioma had no idea what they meant. Then she saw an elderly man emerge from one of the vehicles. Even she recognized him immediately. Almost everyone in the country knew his face. Chief Emmanuel Okafor. one of the richest men in Nigeria, a billionaire businessman, owner of banks, construction companies, oil investments, and countless other businesses. Chioma had seen him on television many times. Now he was walking directly into the hospital, surrounded by bodyguards. The entire building seemed to hold its breath. Chief Emmanuel entered the lobby. His expensive suit looked flawless. Yet his face showed something unexpected. Fear. Genuine fear. He wasn't acting like a billionaire. He was acting like a worried father. "Where is my son?" A hospital administrator rushed forward. "This way, sir." The chief moved quickly toward the intensive care unit. His security team followed. Doctors hurried behind them. The entire scene unfolded before Chioma's eyes. She could barely process it. Then the realization struck her. "Son." The chief had said son. Her eyes widened. The wounded officer, Obinna. He was the billionaire's son. For several moments she simply stood frozen. The man she had carried into a taxi. The man she had held while blood poured from his wound. The man she had stayed up all night worrying about. He was the son of one of the wealthiest men in the country. The revelation felt unreal. Suddenly, one of the doctors spotted her. "Chioma." She looked up. The doctor approached alongside Chief Emmanuel. The billionaire's eyes immediately settled on her. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the doctor turned to the chief. "Sir, this is the young woman who saved your son's life." The hallway became silent. The chief stared at her. His eyes moved over her worn clothes, her torn shirt, her exhausted face. The signs of poverty were obvious. Yet none of that seemed to matter. The doctor continued. "She found him after the shooting." The chief listened carefully. "She stopped the bleeding." Another doctor nodded. "She brought him to the hospital." A nurse stepped forward. "And she stayed here all night." The billionaire looked genuinely stunned. All night. Chioma felt uncomfortable under everyone's attention. She lowered her gaze. "I just did what I could." For several seconds, Chief Emmanuel remained silent. Then something unexpected happened. The billionaire stepped forward and took her hands. The gesture shocked everyone, including Chioma. His voice trembled slightly. "My daughter." Chioma looked up. "If not for you." He paused. Emotion filled his eyes. "If not for you, my son would be dead." The words hung heavily in the air. Chioma didn't know what to say. The chief squeezed her hands. "Thank you." She swallowed hard. "I only wanted to help." The billionaire nodded slowly. "And because of that, I still have my son." At that exact moment, a doctor emerged from the intensive care unit. Everyone turned. The doctor's face finally carried good news. "The patient is stable." A wave of relief swept through the hallway. Several people smiled. Some even applauded softly. Chief Emmanuel closed his eyes. For the first time since arriving, he looked able to breathe again. Obinna was going to live. And standing quietly nearby was the homeless woman whose courage had made it possible. Neither Chioma nor anyone else realized it yet. But that moment was the beginning of a brand new chapter in her life. A chapter she could never have imagined. One that would soon transform her future forever. The news spread quickly. By the following afternoon, everyone in the hospital knew the story of the homeless woman who had saved the life of billionaire Chief Emmanuel Okafor's son. Doctors talked about it. Nurses talked about it. Patients talked about it. Even visitors whispered about the brave young woman named Chioma. Yet despite all the attention, Chioma remained the same person she had always been. Humble, quiet, and completely overwhelmed. She sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, sipping a cup of tea that one of the nurses had bought for her. Everything felt unreal. Only 24 hours earlier, she had been worrying about where she would sleep that night. Now one of the richest men in the country knew her name. She still couldn't understand how her life had changed so quickly. A nurse approached her table. "Chief Emmanuel is looking for you." Chioma nearly dropped her cup. "For me?" The nurse smiled. "Yes." Her stomach tightened. She stood slowly. Why would a billionaire want to see her? Had she done something wrong? The nurse led her through several hallways before stopping outside a private waiting room. Two security guards stood at the entrance. The moment they saw her, they stepped aside. Inside, Chief Emmanuel sat alone. The billionaire looked exhausted. His son was still recovering, but the fear that had dominated his face the previous night seemed to have faded. When he saw Chioma enter, he smiled warmly. "My daughter." Chioma still wasn't used to hearing him call her that. "Good afternoon, sir. Please sit." She obeyed. For several moments, silence filled the room. Then the chief spoke. "I have spent my entire life building businesses." Chioma listened carefully. "I have acquired wealth beyond what most people can imagine." He looked directly at her. "But none of that mattered when I thought I might lose my son." His voice softened. "Obinna is all I have left of his mother." Chioma noticed genuine pain in his eyes. The billionaire wasn't talking like a businessman. He was talking like a father. "I understand." The chief nodded. "The doctors told me everything." He leaned forward. "You carried my son into a taxi while everyone else ran away." Chioma shrugged. "I couldn't leave him. You stayed in this hospital all night. I was worried. You didn't even know him." She smiled faintly. "He needed help." The billionaire stared at her for several seconds. Then he shook his head. "People like you are rare." Chioma lowered her eyes, embarrassed. The chief reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. Her eyes widened. He quickly wrote a figure and handed it to her. Chioma looked down. The amount nearly stopped her heart. It was more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. Her hands trembled. "Sir, take it." She immediately shook her head. "No." The chief blinked. "No, I didn't help him for money." The billionaire looked stunned. Most people would have grabbed the check without hesitation. Yet Chioma was trying to refuse it. "I know you didn't." "Then please keep it." The chief studied her face. For the first time in many years, he found himself speechless. This young woman truly expected nothing in return. The realization only increased his respect for her. Finally, he smiled. "Very well." Relief washed across her face. But the chief wasn't finished. Not even close. A few days later, Obinna's condition improved significantly. The bullet wound was healing. His strength was returning. And the first thing he asked about was the woman who had saved his life. One afternoon, Chioma received permission to visit him. As she entered his private hospital room, she found him sitting upright in bed. His arm was bandaged. Machines still surrounded him, but he looked much better. The moment he saw her, he smiled. "So you're Chioma." She laughed nervously. "And you're Obinna." For several moments they simply looked at each other. Neither quite knew what to say. Finally, Obinna broke the silence. "I owe you my life." Chioma shook her head. "No." "Yes." His expression became serious. "The doctors told me how bad things were." She sat down beside the bed. "I'm just happy you're alive." Obinna studied her carefully. There was no greed in her eyes. No expectation. No hidden agenda. Just genuine concern. It was refreshing, especially considering how many people treated him differently because of his family's wealth. "Thank you." Chioma smiled. "You're welcome." For nearly an hour they talked. About life. About childhood. About dreams. Obinna was surprised by her strength. Chioma was surprised by his humility. When visiting hours ended, neither wanted the conversation to end. As she left, Obinna called after her. "I hope we'll see each other again." Chioma smiled. "I hope so too." 3 days later, Chief Emmanuel contacted her. His assistant informed her that the chief wanted her to attend a meeting. Chioma nearly refused. She owned only a few pieces of clothing. Most were worn and faded. She didn't belong in meetings with billionaires. Yet the assistant insisted. "The chief specifically requested your presence." The following morning, a luxury vehicle arrived to pick her up. The driver transported her to one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. Massive mansions lined the streets. Luxury cars filled enormous driveways. Everything looked impossibly expensive. Eventually the vehicle stopped. The driver opened the door. "We're here." Chioma stepped out, then froze. Before her stood a beautiful modern building. Its glass walls reflected sunlight brilliantly. Professional landscaping surrounded the property. A large ribbon stretched across the entrance. Several reporters stood nearby. Dozens of guests filled the parking lot. Confusion filled her face. "What is this?" The driver smiled. "You'll see." Inside, Chief Emmanuel greeted her. Obinna stood beside him. Both men appeared excited. Chioma looked around. She still didn't understand. Then she noticed a large sign hidden beneath a cloth. The chief stepped forward. "My daughter." She looked at him. "You once told Obinna about your dream." "My dream? To own a fitness center." Her eyes widened. She remembered mentioning it during a conversation. Years of physical labor had taught her the importance of strength and fitness. She had often imagined opening a gym someday, but it had always felt impossible. A fantasy, not reality. The chief smiled. Today, impossible becomes possible. He pulled away the cloth. The sign underneath became visible. For a moment the world stopped. Chioma stared, blinking repeatedly, certain she was imagining things. Her name, her actual name, displayed across the front of a beautiful gym. Tears immediately filled her eyes. "No!" The chief laughed softly. "Yes." She turned toward him. "Sir, this gym belongs to you." The crowd erupted into applause. Reporters snapped photographs. Guests cheered. But Chioma barely noticed any of it. She was too overwhelmed. A dream she had never believed possible stood before her. Real, solid, and somehow hers. The chief handed her a set of keys. "Would you like to see inside?" Still speechless, she nodded. The moment she entered, her jaw dropped. Everything was brand new. Rows of treadmills, weightlifting equipment, exercise machines, training rooms, offices, locker rooms. Every detail was perfect. Chioma walked slowly through the facility, touching equipment, examining rooms, trying desperately to convince herself this wasn't a dream. Finally, she turned toward Chief Emmanuel. "Why?" The billionaire smiled. "Because good people deserve opportunities." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Nobody had ever given her an opportunity before. Nobody. But the surprises weren't over. Not yet. The chief handed her another envelope. "There's one more thing." Confused, she opened it. Inside were property documents. She frowned. "What is this?" "A house." Chioma's eyes widened. "A what?" "A house." Her legs nearly gave out. She had spent years sleeping on cardboard. Years sleeping in abandoned buildings. Years wondering whether rain would leak through broken roofs. And now someone was giving her a house? The chief nodded toward Obinna. "Come." Together they drove to another location. When they arrived, Chioma nearly burst into tears again. The house was beautiful. A modern 3-bedroom home surrounded by a white fence. Flowers decorated the front yard. The paint looked fresh. The windows sparkled. It looked like something from a movie. "Is this real?" Obinna laughed. "Touch it." She walked toward the wall and placed her hand against it. Solid. Real. A home. Her home. The realization hit her like a wave. For years she had dreamed about having a place to call her own. Now she finally did. The emotions became overwhelming. She began crying openly. Chief Emmanuel gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You deserve this." Before she could recover, another vehicle pulled into the driveway. A brand new SUV, shining beneath the afternoon sun. Chioma stared, then looked at the chief, then back at the vehicle, then back at the chief again. "No." The billionaire laughed. "Yes." The driver stepped out and handed her the keys. Her hands shook violently. "I can't accept all this." "You can. It's too much." The chief's expression softened. "My daughter, you saved something priceless." Tears filled her eyes once more. No amount of money could truly repay what you did. For a long moment nobody spoke. The chief then added quietly, "Let us help you start a new life." Chioma looked around. The house, the car, the gym, a future she had never dared imagine. Finally she nodded. Thank you. The chief smiled. Obina smiled. The guests applauded. But not everyone was happy. Far away, inside a luxurious office, another man watched the ceremony on television. His face darkened with every passing second. His name was Chitty, Obina's stepbrother. And as he watched Chioma receive everything she had ever dreamed of, jealousy began burning inside him like a fire. A dangerous fire. One that would eventually threaten all of their lives. The grand opening of Chioma Fitness Center became one of the most talked about events in the city. For weeks, television stations replayed the story. Newspapers printed her photographs. Radio hosts discussed her bravery. Social media users called her the homeless heroine. People admired her journey. A woman who once slept on cardboard now owned one of the most modern gyms in Lagos. To many, she represented hope. Proof that life could change in a single moment. But not everyone was celebrating. Inside a luxurious penthouse overlooking the city, Chitty Okafor stared at a television screen with clenched fists. The news anchor smiled as Chioma's image appeared once again. The inspiring story of Chioma continues to capture hearts across the country. The young woman who saved Officer Obina Okafor's life has now become a successful business owner thanks to the generosity of Chief Emmanuel Okafor. Chitty immediately switched off the television. Silence filled the room. His jaw tightened. His eyes burned with anger. Chioma. Even hearing her name irritated him. Before her arrival, everything had been moving according to plan. Obina was supposed to be dead. The inheritance would eventually become his. His father's attention would finally shift away from Obina. But instead, the exact opposite had happened. Obina survived. The city treated him like a hero, and Chioma had become a national celebrity. Everything had gone wrong. Chitty grabbed a glass from a nearby table and threw it across the room. Crash! The glass shattered against the wall. A servant standing nearby flinched. Get out! The servant immediately obeyed. Alone again, Chitty walked toward the window. Far below, city lights sparkled. His reflection stared back at him. The bitterness inside him continued to grow. He wasn't simply jealous. He was furious and dangerous. Meanwhile, across town, Chioma was experiencing a completely different reality. Her life had become busier than ever. Every day new people visited the gym. Some came because they wanted to exercise. Others simply wanted to meet the famous woman they had heard so much about. Business was booming. The gym was thriving. For the first time in her life, Chioma woke up in her own bed. Every morning she walked through her own home. Every evening she returned to a place that belonged to her. The feeling still seemed unreal. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night convinced she was dreaming. Then she would touch the walls and smile. It was real. All of it. One morning, she arrived at the gym earlier than usual. Several employees greeted her. Good morning, boss. Chioma laughed. She still wasn't comfortable being called boss. As she walked through the facility, she noticed a familiar face entering through the front doors. Obina. A smile immediately appeared on her face. You shouldn't be here. Obina laughed. Good morning to you too. She folded her arms. The doctors told you to rest. I am resting. You are literally standing inside a gym. Exactly. She shook her head. You're impossible. Obina grinned. The truth was he had been looking forward to seeing her. More than he wanted to admit. The days following his hospital stay had given him plenty of time to think. And he found himself thinking about Chioma constantly. Her courage. Her kindness. Her strength. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop. He walked beside her as she inspected equipment. Business seems good. Chioma smiled proudly. It is. You deserve it. Thank you. For a moment, silence settled between them. Not awkward silence. Comfortable silence. The kind that existed between people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Eventually Obina pointed toward a bench press station. Do you still think you can lift more than me? Chioma laughed. I know I can. His eyebrows rose. That's confidence. It's called facts. He pretended to look offended. You know I'm a police officer, right? And I'm strong. Chioma burst into laughter. I carried you into a taxi. Several nearby gym members overheard the conversation and laughed. Obinna shook his head. That was one time. You were unconscious. Exactly. The playful argument continued. Soon they found themselves competing in a friendly workout challenge. Employees gathered nearby. Customers watched with amusement. For the first time in weeks, Obinna felt completely relaxed. No expectations. No business meetings. No family pressure. Just laughter. And somehow, every moment seemed easier when Chioma was around. As weeks passed, a routine developed. Obinna visited the gym almost every day. Sometimes he worked out. Sometimes he simply sat in Chioma's office and talked. The conversations lasted for hours. They discussed childhood memories, dreams, fears, goals, life. Unlike many people, Chioma treated him like an ordinary person. Not like the son of a billionaire. Not like a celebrity police officer. Just Obinna. And he appreciated that more than she realized. One afternoon, they sat together in the gym cafe. Chioma sipped a bottle of water while Obinna stared out the window. You seem distracted. He looked at her. Do I? Yes. He sighed. Work. She nodded. Police issues? Always. For a moment he hesitated. Then he asked quietly, Do you ever think about your parents? The question caught her off guard. A shadow crossed her face. Every day. Obinna immediately regretted asking. I'm sorry. No. She smiled sadly. It's okay. He waited. After a few moments, she continued. I don't remember much about them. That must be hard. It is. Her eyes drifted toward the window. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if they had lived. Obinna listened silently. I wonder if they would be proud of me. The vulnerability in her voice touched him deeply. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. They would. Chioma looked up. Their eyes met. For several seconds, neither spoke. Something shifted in that moment. Something neither fully understood. Connection. A feeling. A spark. Then someone cleared their throat loudly. Both turned. A young employee stood nearby holding paperwork. The moment was broken. Yet neither forgot it. Unfortunately, someone else was beginning to notice the growing closeness between them. Vanessa, Obinna's fiancée. Vanessa was beautiful, elegant, sophisticated. Everything society expected from the future wife of a billionaire heir. But she possessed one flaw. She was extremely possessive. Initially, she hadn't worried about Chioma. How could she? Chioma had been homeless. Vanessa viewed her as insignificant, a temporary part of Obinna's story. Nothing more. But as weeks passed, she noticed changes. Obinna smiled whenever Chioma's name came up. He spent more time at the gym. He answered Chioma's calls immediately. He talked about her constantly. At first Vanessa tried to ignore it. Then she became concerned. Soon concern became jealousy. One evening she sat across from Obinna during dinner. The expensive restaurant barely held her attention. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Eventually she asked the question directly. Were you with Chioma again today? Obinna looked up. Yes. Vanessa forced a smile. You spend a lot of time together. We're friends. The answer didn't satisfy her. Friends. Yes. Vanessa stirred her drink. I just think it's unusual. Obinna frowned. What is? The amount of time you spend with her. His expression hardened slightly. She saved my life. I know. And she's my friend. Vanessa smiled politely. But inside, frustration was growing. The conversation ended there. Yet the issue remained. Over the following days, Vanessa began paying closer attention. The more she observed, the more uncomfortable she became. She saw how happy Obinna seemed around Chioma. How easily they laughed together. How naturally they connected. Eventually she reached a conclusion. If she didn't intervene, she might lose him. A week later, Vanessa made a decision. One she would later regret. That afternoon, Chioma was helping a client complete a workout session when the gym doors opened. The room instantly became quieter. Several people turned. Vanessa entered wearing an expensive designer outfit. Confidence radiated from every step she took. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Chioma. Without hesitation, she walked over. Chioma. Chioma smiled politely. Hello. We need to talk. Something about Vanessa's tone felt wrong. Nevertheless, Chioma nodded. Okay. Together they walked into the office. The moment the door closed, the atmosphere changed. Vanessa crossed her arms. Her smile vanished. Chioma frowned. Is everything all right? No. The answer came immediately. A knot formed in Chioma's stomach. Vanessa took a deep breath. Then she delivered the words she had been rehearsing for days. Stay away from Obina. The room fell silent. Chioma blinked, certain she had misheard. What? You heard me. For several seconds, Chioma simply stared. The accusation shocked her. Vanessa! Don't! Vanessa raised a hand. I see what's happening. Chioma shook her head. Nothing is happening. Really? Yes. Vanessa laughed coldly. Then why are you together all the time? Because we're friends. Friends. The way Vanessa repeated the word made it sound ridiculous. Chioma's patience began slipping. That's exactly what we are. Vanessa stepped closer. I am his fiancée. I know. And I don't appreciate another woman becoming this close to my future husband. Chioma felt hurt. Not because of the accusation. Because Vanessa clearly believed the worst about her. I have never tried to take Obina from you. Vanessa remained unconvinced. Make sure it stays that way. For several seconds, silence filled the office. Then Vanessa turned and walked away. The door closed behind her. Chioma remained standing, alone, confused, and deeply unsettled. Outside, life continued normally. Customers exercised. Music played. Employees worked. But something had changed. The warning echoed repeatedly inside her mind. And although she didn't realize it yet, Vanessa's jealousy was only the beginning. Far darker secrets were hiding beneath the surface. Secrets that would soon threaten everything Chioma and Obina had built together. For the rest of that day, Chioma couldn't concentrate. After Vanessa left the gym, the words she had spoken continued echoing inside her head. Stay away from Obina. No matter how hard she tried to focus on work, the warning refused to leave her mind. As she walked through the gym, greeting customers and supervising employees, her thoughts kept drifting back to the conversation. She had never intended to cause problems. Never. Obina had become her friend. Nothing more. At least that was what she kept telling herself. Yet if she was being completely honest, something had changed recently. She enjoyed spending time with him, more than she probably should. His visits brightened her day. His laughter made her smile. His encouragement gave her confidence. And somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing him as simply the man she saved. He had become someone important to her. That realization made Vanessa's warning even more uncomfortable. Late that evening, after the gym closed, Chioma sat alone in her office. The building was quiet. Most of the employees had already gone home. Only a few cleaners remained. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. Life had become complicated. Before meeting Obina, her biggest concern had been survival. Finding food, finding work, finding a safe place to sleep. Now she owned a successful business, had a beautiful home, and somehow found herself caught in emotional situations she never expected. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She looked up. One of her employees stood at the doorway. "Boss, someone is waiting for you outside." Chioma frowned. "Who?" The employee smiled. "Officer Obina." Her heart skipped. Immediately, she became annoyed with herself. Why did hearing his name affect her like that? She stood. "I'll be right there." Moments later, she stepped outside. Obina leaned casually against his vehicle. The moment he saw her, he smiled. "Long day." Chioma nodded. "You have no idea." He studied her carefully. Something seemed different. Usually she looked happy whenever she saw him. Tonight she seemed distracted. "Tough day at work?" "You could say that." Obina frowned. "Is everything okay?" For a moment she considered telling him about Vanessa's visit. Then she changed her mind. She didn't want to create problems between them, so she forced a smile. "I'm fine." Obinna wasn't convinced, but he decided not to push. "I was heading to dinner, and I thought maybe you'd join me." Chioma hesitated. Vanessa's warning immediately resurfaced. Stay away from Obinna. The smart thing would be to decline, to create some distance, to avoid misunderstandings. Yet when she looked into his hopeful eyes, the answer escaped before she could stop it. "Okay." His smile widened. "Great." 30 minutes later, they sat at a small restaurant overlooking the ocean. The atmosphere was peaceful. Waves crashed gently against the shore. Cool evening air drifted through the open windows. Unlike the expensive places Obinna often visited, this restaurant felt simple, comfortable, real. Exactly the kind of place Chioma liked. They ordered food and began talking. At first, the conversation focused on work, the gym, the police department, current events. But eventually Obinna noticed her unusual silence. "Something's bothering you." Chioma looked down at her plate. "No." "Yes." She sighed. "You should have been a detective." He laughed. "I practically am." For several seconds she remained quiet. Then she spoke carefully. "Do you ever feel like people judge you before they know you?" The question surprised him. "All the time." Her eyes met his. "Really?" "Of course." Chioma looked skeptical. "You're rich. And you have everything." Obinna leaned back. "You think that protects me from judgment?" She didn't answer. He continued. "Most people see my family's money before they see me." The statement caught her attention. "They assume things." "Like what?" "That I'm spoiled." He smiled sadly. "That I've never struggled. That I don't understand ordinary people." Chioma nodded slowly. She could see how that might happen. Obinna pointed at her. "You understand exactly what I mean." A faint smile appeared on her face. "Maybe." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours. As always, time seemed to pass quickly when they were together. Neither noticed a luxury vehicle parked across the street. Inside sat Vanessa, watching. Her expression darkened with every passing minute. She had followed Obinna. At first she simply wanted confirmation. Now she was getting it. The sight of them laughing together filled her with anger. Her nails dug into her palms. She hated what she was seeing. The emotional connection between them was becoming impossible to ignore. When dinner finally ended, Vanessa drove away before they could notice her. But her jealousy continued growing. The next morning, she paid an unexpected visit to someone else. Chitty. The two met inside a private lounge owned by the Okafor family. Chitty arrived first. Vanessa arrived minutes later. Neither looked happy. After exchanging greetings, they sat across from each other. "What did you want to discuss?" Chitty asked. Vanessa folded her arms. "It's about Obinna." Immediately Chitty became interested. "What about him?" "It's that woman." "Chioma?" Vanessa nodded. Chitty laughed bitterly. "I should have known." Even hearing Chioma's name irritated him. Vanessa noticed his reaction. "You don't like her either." The statement wasn't a question. Chitty smiled coldly. "Not particularly." Vanessa leaned forward. "She's becoming a problem." For a brief moment, something dangerous flickered in Chitty's eyes, but it disappeared quickly. "What kind of problem?" "Obinna spends all his time with her." Chitty considered this. Interesting. Very interesting. The situation could potentially benefit him. After all, the closer Obinna became to Chioma, the more tension it would create. And tension often created opportunities. "You might be overreacting." Vanessa shook her head. "I'm not." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Her voice hardened. "I know what I saw." Chitty remained thoughtful. Then a slow smile appeared. Perhaps Chioma's presence could be useful after all. Perhaps she could become a distraction, a weakness, a vulnerability, and weaknesses could be exploited. Meanwhile, completely unaware of these conversations, Chioma continued trying to avoid unnecessary drama. For several days, she reduced contact with Obinna. Not dramatically, just enough to create some space. When he called, she occasionally responded later. When he visited the gym, she remained busy. When he suggested spending time together, she sometimes declined. At first Obinna assumed she was simply occupied. But eventually he noticed the pattern. Something had changed, and he wanted answers. One afternoon he arrived at the gym unexpectedly. Chioma was supervising a training session. The moment she saw him, she smiled politely, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Obinna noticed immediately. When the session ended, he approached her. "We need to talk." Chioma sighed. "About what?" "About whatever you're not telling me." She avoided his gaze. "There isn't anything." "There is." His voice remained calm. "But you keep pretending otherwise." For several moments she remained silent. Finally she spoke. "Maybe we should spend less time together." The words surprised him. "What?" "You heard me." "Why?" Chioma struggled to answer. "Because your fiancé hates me. Because people are talking. Because I'm starting to care about you more than I should. Because this friendship is becoming dangerous." Yet none of those words left her mouth. Instead she simply said, "It's complicated." Obinna stared at her. Then understanding slowly appeared. "Vanessa." Chioma's eyes widened. He had guessed immediately. "She spoke to you." The silence confirmed it. Anger flashed across his face. "What did she say?" "Obinna." "What did she say?" Chioma hesitated. Finally she told him. Everything. The warning. The accusations. The confrontation. By the time she finished, Obinna looked furious. "She had no right. She's your fiancé. That doesn't matter." "It matters to her." Obinna ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. You didn't do anything." "No." His expression darkened. "But I should have noticed this sooner." For several moments neither spoke. Then Obinna looked directly into her eyes. "I value your friendship." The sincerity in his voice touched her. "And nobody is going to decide who I can or can't be friends with." A complicated mixture of emotions filled her chest. Gratitude, relief, and something deeper. Something she was trying very hard not to acknowledge. Unfortunately, someone else was paying close attention. Later that evening, Vanessa received confirmation that Obinna had confronted Chioma. The news only intensified her frustration. Everything she did seemed to push them closer together instead of further apart. Meanwhile, Chitty watched events unfold from the sidelines. And unlike Vanessa, he wasn't acting out of jealousy. He was acting out of something far more dangerous. Hatred. Deep, poisonous hatred. As he sat alone in his office that night, he opened a drawer. Inside was a photograph. The picture showed Obinna standing beside Chief Emmanuel. Both smiling. Both happy. Chitty stared at it for a long moment. Then his expression hardened. His resentment toward his stepbrother had been building for years. Long before Chioma entered the picture. Long before the shooting. Long before any of this. And now, thanks to one homeless woman who refused to let Obinna die, everything he had planned was beginning to unravel. Slowly, he placed the photograph back inside the drawer. Then he closed it. A cold smile appeared on his face. One filled with dangerous intentions. Because while Vanessa worried about losing her fiancé, Chitty was already planning something much darker. And soon, everyone around Obinna would be pulled into a storm they never saw coming. Several weeks passed after Vanessa's warning. On the surface, life seemed normal. The gym continued thriving. Customers filled the training halls daily. Chioma's business expanded faster than anyone expected. Even local television stations occasionally invited her for interviews. People loved her story. The orphan who had once slept in abandoned buildings was now a successful entrepreneur. Yet beneath all the success, Chioma felt increasingly conflicted. No matter how hard she tried to create distance between herself and Obinna, it never lasted. He remained a constant presence in her life. Somehow he always found reasons to visit the gym. Sometimes he came to exercise. Sometimes he claimed he needed fitness advice. Other times he simply showed up with coffee and spent hours talking to her. And if she was honest with herself, she enjoyed every moment. That was the problem. She enjoyed it too much. One afternoon, while they sat together in her office, Obinna looked unusually excited. "What happened?" He smiled. "My father is hosting a family dinner this weekend." Chioma nodded. "That sounds important." "It is." His smile widened. "And you're invited." Chioma nearly choked on her drink. "What? You heard me." She stared at him. "Absolutely not." Obinna laughed. "Why not?" "Because I'm not family. You are important to us." "That's different." "No, it isn't." Chioma shook her head repeatedly. There was no way she belonged at a gathering filled with wealthy business executives and influential family members. The thought alone made her nervous. Obinna leaned forward. "My father specifically asked about you." "Still no." "Please." "No." He smiled. "You know you're stubborn." She folded her arms. "And you're annoying." "That's not a no." She sighed. For the next 20 minutes, Obinna continued persuading her. Eventually she surrendered, mostly because she was tired of arguing. "Fine." His face immediately brightened. "Excellent. I'm already regretting this." "You'll be fine." Unfortunately, Chioma wasn't convinced. By the time Saturday arrived, her nervousness had become overwhelming. Standing inside her bedroom, she stared at several outfits spread across her bed. Nothing seemed right. Nothing seemed good enough. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror. For a brief moment, she saw the homeless girl she used to be. The girl who never belonged. The girl people ignored. The girl who slept on cardboard. The insecurities she thought she had buried suddenly returned. What if everyone judged her? What if she embarrassed herself? What if Vanessa was there? That last thought made her stomach tighten. Eventually she chose a simple but elegant dress. Not overly expensive. Not flashy. Just beautiful. When she finally arrived at the Okafor estate, she understood why people called it a mansion. The property was enormous. Massive gates guarded the entrance. Beautiful gardens stretched across the grounds. Fountains sparkled beneath golden lights. Luxury vehicles filled the driveway. The place looked more like a palace than a home. Chioma parked her SUV and sat quietly for a moment, taking deep breaths, trying to calm her nerves. "You can do this." Finally, she stepped out. A uniformed attendant escorted her inside. The interior was even more impressive. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings. Marble floors reflected warm lighting. Elegant artwork decorated the walls. Everything radiated wealth. As Chioma walked through the mansion, she couldn't help remembering the abandoned building where she once slept. The contrast felt unbelievable. Suddenly, she heard a familiar voice. "Chioma!" She turned. Obinna approached wearing a tailored black suit. He looked handsome, far more handsome than she wanted to admit. When his eyes landed on her, he stopped walking. For a brief moment, he simply stared. Chioma immediately noticed. "What?" Obinna smiled. "You look beautiful." Heat rushed into her cheeks. "Thank you." The compliment affected her more than it should have. Before either could say anything else, Chief Emmanuel approached. His face lit up. "My daughter." Chioma smiled. "Good evening, sir." The older man hugged her warmly. "I'm glad you came. Thank you for inviting me." The chief studied her carefully. "You seem nervous. Is it that obvious?" He laughed. "Only slightly." The joke helped her relax. Soon he introduced her to several guests. Business partners, family friends, community leaders. To Chioma's surprise, everyone treated her kindly. Nobody looked down on her. Nobody mocked her past. Many praised her courage. For the first time that evening, she began enjoying herself. But not everyone was happy to see her. Across the room, Vanessa watched silently. Her expression darkened. The sight of Chioma laughing with Obinna immediately irritated her. Even worse, Chief Emmanuel clearly adored the young woman. Everywhere Chioma went, people welcomed her, praised her, admired her. Vanessa hated it. Meanwhile, standing nearby, Chitty observed everything quietly. Unlike Vanessa, he concealed his emotions well. A pleasant smile remained on his face. But behind that smile lurked resentment. Deep resentment. As the evening progressed, Chioma mingled with guests. At one point she stepped away from the main gathering to find a restroom. The mansion was enormous, much larger than she realized. Several hallways branched in different directions. After asking a servant for directions, she headed upstairs. The restroom was located near the east wing. At least that was what she thought. Unfortunately, she took a wrong turn. When she realized her mistake, she laughed softly. Great! Now she was lost. As she searched for the correct hallway, she heard voices nearby. At first she paid little attention. Then she recognized one of them. Vanessa. Chioma slowed. The second voice belonged to Chitty. The two sounded unusually serious. Curiosity stirred inside her. The door to a nearby study stood slightly open. Not enough for someone to see inside, but enough for voices to carry. Chioma had no intention of spying. None whatsoever. Yet as she prepared to walk away, one sentence stopped her cold. This never should have happened. Vanessa sounded furious. Chioma frowned. What were they talking about? Then Chitty responded. How was I supposed to know some homeless girl would interfere? The words hit her like a slap. Homeless girl. They were talking about her. Her heart began pounding. Without realizing it, she moved closer. Inside the room, Vanessa paced angrily. You promised me everything would be handled. Chitty looked equally frustrated. I did handle it. No. Vanessa pointed toward the window. You failed. Chioma's stomach tightened. Something about the conversation felt wrong. Very wrong. Then Vanessa delivered the sentence that changed everything. If Chioma hadn't saved Obina, none of this would be happening. The world seemed to stop. Chioma froze. Every muscle in her body became rigid. Inside the room, Chitty slammed a fist onto a desk. Do you think I don't know that? His voice dripped with anger. One bullet. Vanessa shook her head. One bullet and our problems would have disappeared. Chioma's eyes widened. Her breathing became shallow. She suddenly understood. No, couldn't be. Yet every instinct told her otherwise. The shooting, Obina, the attack, the strange resentment. Everything was beginning to make sense. Inside the study, Chitty continued speaking. Instead, she's a hero. Vanessa crossed her arms. And now Obina practically worships her. The bitterness in her voice shocked Chioma. But Chitty's next words shocked her even more. She ruined everything. A cold chill ran down her spine. The realization crashed over her completely. They were involved. Both of them. The attack on Obina wasn't random. It had been planned. And somehow Chitty and Vanessa were connected to it. Chioma wanted to leave immediately. She needed to find Obina. She needed to tell him everything. Every second mattered. Slowly she began backing away from the door. Carefully. Quietly. Unfortunately, panic made people careless. As she stepped backward, her elbow struck something. A large decorative statue. Time seemed to slow. Chioma reached out instinctively, trying to stop it, trying to catch it, trying to save herself. But it was too late. The statue tipped, then crashed onto the floor. Smash! The sound exploded through the hallway. Silence followed. Absolute silence. Inside the study, the conversation stopped instantly. Chioma's heart nearly stopped. For one terrifying moment, nobody moved. Then she heard footsteps. Fast footsteps. Coming directly toward the door. Fear surged through her body. The study door flew open. Vanessa appeared first. Chitty right behind her. All three froze. Their eyes met. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. The truth was obvious. Chioma had heard everything. Vanessa's face turned pale. Chitty's expression darkened immediately. A dangerous look entered his eyes. The kind of look that made Chioma's blood run cold. For several seconds, silence filled the hallway. Then Chitty spoke. His voice was calm. Too calm. How much did you hear? Chioma took a step backward. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run. But her legs felt frozen. Chitty took one step forward. Then another. His smile vanished completely, and for the first time since meeting him, Chioma saw who he truly was. Not a businessman, not a wealthy heir, not a charming socialite, but a man capable of terrible things. The fear in her chest intensified, because she suddenly realized one terrifying truth. She wasn't supposed to know their secret, and people who knew dangerous secrets often disappeared. The realization struck her like lightning. She had accidentally uncovered something deadly, and now Chitty knew it. The next few minutes would determine whether she lived long enough to tell Obina the truth. The hallway felt impossibly silent. Chioma stood frozen beside the shattered statue. Tiny pieces of marble lay scattered across the polished floor. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Across from her stood Chitty and Vanessa. Neither looked surprised anymore. Neither looked worried. Instead, both wore expressions that terrified her. Because they knew, and she knew, the secret was no longer hidden. For several seconds, nobody moved. The distant sounds of laughter and music drifted faintly from downstairs where the family gathering continued. The guests had no idea that only a few rooms away, something dangerous was unfolding. Chioma forced herself to speak. I was looking for the restroom. Even as the words left her mouth, she knew how weak they sounded. Chitty's eyes narrowed. The restroom. His voice was calm. Too calm. Vanessa folded her arms. Do you really expect us to believe that? Chioma swallowed hard. Her mind raced desperately. She needed to leave. Immediately. She needed to find Obina. She needed to tell him everything. But Chitty was standing between her and the staircase. And judging from the look in his eyes, he wasn't about to let her walk away. The silence stretched. Then Chitty smiled. The sight made Chioma's stomach twist, because there was nothing friendly about it. How much did you hear? Chioma hesitated. The wrong answer could be dangerous, but so could the truth. I don't know what you're talking about. Vanessa laughed bitterly. Stop lying. The sharpness in her voice made Chioma flinch. For a brief moment all three stood motionless. Then Chioma made a decision. Run. Without warning, she turned and sprinted down the hallway. Stop her! Vanessa shouted. Chioma's powerful legs carried her forward. Years of physical labor and intense training had made her strong. Very strong. She rounded a corner and raced toward the staircase. Behind her, footsteps thundered. Chitty was chasing her. She could hear him shouting. Could hear Vanessa calling after him. The mansion suddenly felt like a maze. Her heart pounded wildly. If she could just reach the main hall, if she could just find Obina, everything would be okay. She reached the staircase and rushed downward. Guests filled the lower floor. People laughed. Conversations flowed. Nobody noticed the panic on her face. Nobody understood what was happening. Chioma! The voice came from behind. She glanced back. Big mistake. Her foot slipped on one of the steps. She stumbled. Not enough to fall completely, but enough to lose valuable seconds. Strong hands suddenly grabbed her arm. Chitty. He pulled her backward. Chioma reacted instantly. Years of lifting weights had given her tremendous strength. She twisted violently. The movement surprised Chitty. He lost his grip. Several nearby guests turned toward the commotion. What happened? Is everything all right? Chitty immediately forced a smile. Everything's fine. His voice sounded relaxed. Convincing. Too convincing. Chioma stared at him. The casual way he lied chilled her. This wasn't a man acting out of panic. This was a man who had already accepted what needed to be done. Vanessa quickly joined them. Her smile looked equally fake. Chioma isn't feeling well. Several guests nodded sympathetically. One woman stepped forward. Should we call someone? No need, Vanessa replied quickly. We'll take care of her. Chioma opened her mouth to speak, to tell everyone the truth. But the words caught in her throat. What if nobody believed her? What evidence did she have? None. Only a conversation she had overheard. A conversation that Chitty and Vanessa would deny. And judging by their expressions, they knew it. Chitty gently placed a hand on her shoulder. To everyone else, the gesture looked friendly. Supportive. but Chioma felt the threat hidden beneath it. His fingers tightened slightly. A warning. Let's talk somewhere private. His smile never wavered. Chioma's fear intensified. She realized she was trapped. Not physically, yet, but strategically. One wrong move could make everything worse. So she nodded, pretending to cooperate. For now, the three walked away from the crowd, toward a quieter section of the mansion. The moment they entered an empty lounge, Chitty locked the door. The sound echoed through the room. Click. Chioma immediately stepped backward. Vanessa moved toward one side of the room. Chitty remained near the door, blocking the exit. The friendly masks disappeared instantly. Now, Chitty said calmly, we can talk honestly. Chioma folded her arms, trying to hide her fear. You tried to kill Obina. Neither denied it. That alone was answer enough. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Look what you've done. What I've done. Yes. Vanessa pointed at her. If you had minded your own business, none of this would be happening. Chioma stared at her in disbelief. The woman sounded genuinely angry, as if Chioma were somehow responsible. You tried to murder him. Vanessa's expression hardened. And you ruined everything. The hatred in her voice shocked Chioma. Meanwhile, Chitty remained calm, dangerously calm. He walked toward a nearby cabinet and poured himself a drink, as though they were discussing ordinary business. Not attempted murder, not kidnapping, not life and death. Let's be practical. Chioma looked at him. What does that mean? It means we have a problem. He took a sip. And unfortunately, you're the problem. The words sent ice through her veins. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Chitty set down his glass and reached inside his jacket. Chioma's heart nearly stopped. Slowly, he pulled out a handgun. The weapon gleamed beneath the room's lights. Vanessa didn't look surprised, which meant she already knew he had it. Chioma instinctively stepped backward. Her pulse exploded. Every survival instinct screamed at her. Run. Fight. Do something. But her body refused to move, not while staring at the gun. Relax, Chitty said. The statement was almost absurd. Chioma laughed nervously. Relax. Yes. The gun remained pointed downward. For now. Nobody needs to get hurt. Chioma's eyes widened. You've already hurt people. Chitty ignored the comment. His expression remained cold, calculating. You have two choices. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. What choices? Forget what you heard. Chioma stared at him. And if I don't? Chitty's eyes darkened. Neither he nor Vanessa answered. They didn't need to. The implication was obvious. Silence filled the room. Finally, Chioma shook her head. Obina deserves the truth. For the first time, genuine anger flashed across Chitty's face. You really are stubborn. I won't lie for you. Vanessa groaned. See? I told you. Chitty sighed. Then something changed. His expression hardened completely. The last trace of friendliness vanished. Then we have no choice. Before Chioma could react, the door opened. Two large men entered. Bodyguards. Not official security personnel. Private men loyal to Chitty. Chioma immediately understood. This had been planned. Maybe not specifically for her. But Chitty clearly kept people around for situations like this. The realization terrified her. The bodyguards moved toward her. Chioma's muscles tightened. She wasn't helpless. She was strong. Stronger than most people realized. The first guard reached for her arm. Big mistake. Chioma grabbed his wrist and twisted. The man cried out. She drove her shoulder into his chest. The guard crashed backward into a table. Crash. The furniture shattered. For one glorious second, hope surged inside her. Maybe she could escape. Maybe. The second guard tackled her from the side. The impact drove the air from her lungs. She fought fiercely, punching, kicking, struggling. Years of hardship had taught her never to surrender easily. But she was outnumbered. Within moments, both guards managed to restrain her. Breathing heavily, Chioma glared at Chitty. You won't get away with this. Chitty looked almost amused. People always say that. He nodded toward the guards. Take her. The men dragged her toward a rear exit. Chioma continued fighting, continued shouting, continued resisting, but the mansion was large, and the music from the party concealed most of the noise. Nobody came. Nobody saw. Nobody realized what was happening. Outside, darkness had settled across the estate. The cool night air struck her face. Several vehicles waited nearby. One black SUV stood ready with its engine running. The sight made her stomach sink. This wasn't spontaneous. They had already prepared transportation. Vanessa approached the vehicle. Her expression remained tense. Unlike Chitty, she seemed nervous, almost frightened. Perhaps the reality of what they were doing was finally affecting her. Chioma stared at her. You don't have to do this. For a brief moment, uncertainty appeared in Vanessa's eyes. Then it vanished. You should have stayed away. The response broke whatever sympathy Chioma still had for her. The guards forced Chioma into the back seat. One climbed in beside her. The other sat in front. Chitty entered last. The handgun remained visible. The engine roared. The SUV began moving. As the mansion disappeared behind them, panic threatened to overwhelm her. She looked through the window. The city lights passed quickly. Nobody knew where she was. Nobody knew she was in danger. Nobody except perhaps Obina. The thought gave her a small measure of hope. Would he notice she was missing? Would he look for her? Would he realize something was wrong? She prayed he would, because she had no idea where they were taking her. Minutes passed, then 30, then 40. Gradually, the city began disappearing. Buildings became scarce. Streetlights became fewer. The roads grew emptier. Trees replaced houses. Darkness surrounded them. Chioma's fear deepened. She knew exactly what this meant. They weren't taking her somewhere to talk. They weren't taking her somewhere to negotiate. They were taking her somewhere isolated. Somewhere nobody would hear screams. Somewhere nobody would ask questions. The realization struck her with brutal force. They intended to kill her. She looked at Chitty. The man sat calmly, staring through the windshield, as though this were just another evening, just another task, just another problem to solve. The complete absence of remorse frightened her more than the gun. Finally, after what felt like forever, the vehicle turned onto a narrow dirt road. Dense forest surrounded them. Moonlight filtered through the trees. The road grew rough. Branches scraped against the SUV. The atmosphere felt eerie, silent, wrong. Eventually the vehicle stopped. The engine died. For several seconds nobody moved. Then Chitty opened his door. We're here. Those 3 words hit Chioma harder than any punch ever could. The forest stretched endlessly around them. Dark, empty, terrifying. And as the guards dragged her from the vehicle, one horrifying truth became impossible to ignore. Unless a miracle happened soon, she might never leave this forest alive. The forest was silent, too silent. As Chioma stood beneath the towering trees, fear gripped her like a vice. The black SUV that had carried her there sat nearby with its headlights cutting through the darkness. Beyond those lights, endless shadows stretched in every direction. There were no houses, no passing vehicles, no witnesses, nothing, only darkness and danger. The 2 guards forced her forward until she reached a large tree. One of them produced a thick rope. The sight made her stomach turn. She struggled again, desperately, furiously, but exhaustion was beginning to catch up with her. The fight at the mansion, the stressful drive, the emotional shock, everything had drained her strength. Within moments, her wrists were secured behind the tree. The rope bit painfully into her skin. Chioma pulled against it. It didn't move, not even slightly. The guards knew what they were doing. When they finished, they stepped away. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The only sounds came from insects hidden among the trees. Far above, moonlight filtered through the leaves. The atmosphere felt unreal, like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Chitty slowly approached her. The handgun remained in his hand. His face was calm, cold, emotionless. The expression frightened her more than his weapon. because it suggested he had already decided her fate. Vanessa stood several feet away. Unlike Chitty, she looked uncomfortable, nervous. Her arms remained folded tightly across her chest. She avoided making eye contact, as though some part of her couldn't bear to look directly at what was happening. Chioma noticed immediately, and she seized the opportunity. "Vanessa!" The woman flinched. "Don't. Look at me." Vanessa reluctantly lifted her eyes. "What? You don't have to do this." Silence followed. For a brief moment, uncertainty appeared on Vanessa's face. Chioma pressed forward. "You can still stop this." Chitty laughed softly. The sound echoed through the forest. "Stop wasting your breath." Chioma ignored him. Her attention remained focused on Vanessa. "Whatever problems you have with me, this isn't the answer." Vanessa's expression tightened. "You don't understand." "Then explain it." The woman shook her head. "You ruined everything." The statement stunned Chioma. "How?" Vanessa finally looked directly at her. Tears of frustration filled her eyes. "Before you appeared, my future was secure." Chioma stared. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't." Vanessa's voice grew bitter. "Everyone loves you." The accusation sounded almost absurd. Yet Vanessa clearly believed it. "The media loves you." She pointed angrily. "Chief Emmanuel loves you." Her voice cracked. "And Obina." She stopped. Chioma immediately understood. The real issue wasn't wealth. It wasn't status. It was jealousy. Pure jealousy. Vanessa was afraid. Afraid of losing Obina. Afraid of losing her place in his life. Afraid of losing everything she believed belonged to her. Unfortunately, fear had pushed her into dangerous territory. "Vanessa." Chioma's voice softened. "I never wanted to take Obina away from you." The words were sincere. At least they had been. Once. Now things felt more complicated. But she still meant them. Vanessa looked away, unable to answer. Meanwhile, Chitty appeared bored by the conversation. He checked his watch, then glanced toward the road. "We don't have all night." The casual way he said it sent chills down Chioma's spine. To him, this was simply business. Problem requiring a solution. Nothing more. Nothing less. Back in Lagos, several kilometers away, another problem was beginning to unfold. Obina stood inside the Okafor mansion. His expression darkened with every passing minute. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. The family gathering had ended nearly an hour ago. Most guests had already departed. Yet Chioma was nowhere to be found. At first he assumed she had gone home. But when he called her phone, she didn't answer. That wasn't like her. Chioma almost always returned calls. Especially his. He tried again. Still nothing. A knot formed in his stomach. Nearby, Chief Emmanuel noticed his concern. "What's wrong?" Obina lowered his phone. "I can't reach Chioma." His father frowned. "Maybe she's asleep." "No." The response came immediately. Something inside him refused to accept that explanation. The feeling grew stronger with every passing second. A veteran police officer learned to trust his instincts. And right now, his instincts were screaming. Something had happened. Without another word, he left the room. Chief Emmanuel watched him go, concern slowly appearing on his face. Outside, Obina climbed into his vehicle. He tried calling again. Nothing. The knot in his stomach tightened. Then suddenly he remembered something. Several months earlier, he had purchased a new smartphone for Chioma. As part of the setup process, he had helped install a location-sharing application. A safety feature. Nothing more. At the time, neither had thought much about it. Now it might save her life. His hands moved quickly, opening the application, searching for her profile. Then the location appeared. Obina's blood ran cold. The signal wasn't in Lagos. It wasn't near her house. It wasn't near the gym. It was moving through a remote area outside the city, deep in a heavily forested region. At nearly midnight, the realization hit him immediately. Chioma wasn't missing. She had been taken. Back in the forest, time seemed to move painfully slowly. Chioma remained tied to the tree, Her muscles ached. Her wrists burned. And fear continued growing. She tried working the ropes loose. Nothing happened. The knots remained secure. Nearby, the guards stood watch. One leaned against the SUV. The other paced slowly. Neither appeared concerned. Why would they be? As far as they knew, nobody was coming. Nobody even knew where they were. Eventually, Chitty walked toward her again. The handgun remained visible. Moonlight reflected off the metal. Chioma swallowed hard. "You don't have to do this." The statement sounded weaker this time. Even she could hear it. Chitty stopped a few feet away. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "Do you know what the funniest part is?" Chioma didn't answer. He continued anyway. "My father always talked about fairness." Bitterness entered his voice. "Fairness." He laughed again. "But he never treated us fairly." For the first time, genuine emotion appeared. Anger. Deep anger. Years of it. He loved Obinna. The words dripped with resentment. Everything was always about Obinna. Chioma listened carefully, because she suddenly realized something important. Chitty wanted to talk. People often talked when they believed they had already won. "My father praised him." He paced slowly. "My father protected him." His fists tightened. "My father trusted him." The bitterness became almost unbearable. "And when I discovered the contents of the will..." He stopped speaking. The silence hung heavily in the air. Chioma's heart pounded. She remembered the conversation she had overheard. The inheritance. The favoritism. Now everything made sense. "You wanted his money." Chitty's eyes flashed. "I wanted what should have been mine." The correction came instantly. "No." Chioma shook her head. "You wanted everything." The truth angered him. She could see it. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Chitty smiled again. But there was nothing pleasant about it. "Maybe." Nearby, Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Clearly she had heard this speech before. Perhaps many times. Perhaps enough times to stop questioning it. Suddenly, one of the guards approached. "Boss." Chitty turned. "What?" "I think we should finish this." The statement chilled Chioma. Because the guard wasn't speaking emotionally. He was discussing murder like a routine task. A simple item on a checklist. The realization made her pulse race. Time was running out. Far away, Obinna's vehicle sped down the highway. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The location signal continued moving. Still active. Still transmitting. Thank God. Beside him sat two trusted police officers. Both armed. Both aware something serious was happening. Additional units followed behind. Blue lights flashed in the darkness. The convoy raced toward the forest. Every second mattered. Obinna's thoughts spun wildly. What had happened? Who took her? Why? Then another possibility entered his mind. A possibility so terrible he almost rejected it immediately. Chitty. The thought felt impossible. Yet somehow it also made sense. Pieces of old suspicions began resurfacing. Questions surrounding the shooting. Inconsistencies. Small details he had ignored. His jaw tightened. If Chitty was involved? No. He couldn't think about that now. The priority was finding Chioma alive. Nothing else mattered. Back in the forest, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Even Vanessa seemed uneasy. She approached Chitty quietly. "We should leave." He looked at her. "What?" "This has gone too far." The statement surprised everyone, including Chioma. Perhaps Vanessa was finally realizing the reality of their actions. Perhaps guilt was catching up to her. Chitty looked unimpressed. "No. We can still walk away." His expression hardened instantly. "Walk away?" Vanessa hesitated. "We could threaten her." Chitty stared, then laughed. The sound sent chills through Chioma. "You think she'll stay quiet?" Vanessa didn't answer, because she knew the truth. Chioma would never stay silent. Not after what she had heard. Not after what she knew. Not after learning who arranged the attack on Obinna. The secret was simply too dangerous. And everyone understood it. The tension thickened. Silence returned. The guards exchanged nervous glances. Even they seemed eager to leave. Only Chidi remained completely calm. Finally, he checked his watch, then nodded. It's time. The words hit Chioma like a physical blow. Her heart pounded violently. Fear surged through every part of her body. This was it. The moment she had been dreading. The moment everything would be decided. One of the guards stepped toward her. Another moved closer. Vanessa looked away, unable to watch. And somewhere in the darkness, several kilometers away, Obina's convoy raced through the night, getting closer, closer, and closer still. But neither Chioma nor her captors knew that yet. All she knew was that death felt terrifyingly near, and unless help arrived soon, she might never see another sunrise. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Moonlight filtered through the towering trees, casting long shadows across the clearing. Chioma stood tied to the tree, her wrists burning from the ropes that held her in place. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. Every instinct screamed that danger was seconds away. Across from her stood Chidi. The handgun rested comfortably in his hand. His expression remained cold, calm, certain, as though everything had already been decided. Nearby, Vanessa stood with her arms folded tightly across her chest. She looked pale, uneasy. The reality of the situation was finally settling on her. This was no longer a plan, no longer a discussion, no longer an angry fantasy. This was real, very real, and there was no turning back. One of the guards shifted nervously. "Boss." Chidi glanced at him. "What?" "We've been here too long." The guard looked around uneasily. The darkness surrounding them suddenly felt threatening. "We should finish this and leave." Chioma swallowed hard. The words struck like a knife. Finish this. That was how they described ending a human life. As though it were nothing more than an unfinished chore. A task to complete. Problem to solve. For a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm her. Then she forced herself to remain calm. Panic wouldn't help. Thinking would. There had to be a way. Some opportunity. Some chance. Even a small one. She pulled against the ropes again. Nothing. The knots remained secure, strong, unmovable. Her gaze shifted toward Vanessa. Perhaps there was still hope there. Some lingering conscience. Some last trace of humanity. "Vanessa." The woman didn't respond. "Please." Finally Vanessa looked at her. The guilt in her eyes was impossible to miss. "You don't have to do this." Vanessa looked away immediately. "I don't want to hear it." "Then why are you here?" The question struck a nerve. Vanessa's expression tightened. For several seconds she remained silent. Then she spoke quietly. "Because it's too late." Chioma shook her head. "No." Her voice grew stronger. "It's only too late if you allow this to happen." The words hung in the air. Vanessa looked shaken. For the first time, genuine doubt appeared. Unfortunately, Chidi noticed. And he wasn't pleased. "Enough." His voice cut through the forest. Vanessa immediately fell silent. The authority in his tone was obvious. Chidi turned toward Chioma. "Stop trying to manipulate her. I'm telling the truth." "No." He took several steps closer. "You're trying to survive." Chioma met his gaze. "Of course I am." The honesty surprised him. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then Chidi laughed softly. "I almost admire you." The statement sounded bizarre, yet somehow genuine. "You've caused me more problems than anyone else." Chioma frowned. "I saved your brother." "Exactly." Bitterness immediately returned to his voice. "If you had walked away that night." He stopped. His jaw tightened. The anger radiating from him felt almost physical. Everything would be different. The statement revealed more than he intended. Because beneath the hatred, beneath the resentment, beneath the greed, there was regret. Not regret for what he had done. Regret that he had failed. The realization chilled Chioma. This man truly wished Obina had died. Meanwhile, several kilometers away, Obina's convoy raced through the darkness. The location tracker remained active, still transmitting, still moving. Obina stared at the screen. The signal had finally stopped. That wasn't good. Not good at all. because stationary usually meant one thing. Whoever had taken Chioma had reached their destination. His grip tightened around the steering wheel. Fear mixed with anger. Every second mattered now. Beside him, one of the officers checked his weapon. "We're close." Obinna nodded. The officer studied him carefully. "You think she's alive?" The question struck him hard. For a moment he couldn't answer. Finally he spoke. "She has to be." It wasn't confidence. It was hope. Desperate hope. Back in the forest, the atmosphere continued growing heavier. The tension felt suffocating. One of the guards moved behind Chioma. Another stood several feet away. Both appeared increasingly anxious. Even criminals disliked waiting, especially when they knew something terrible was about to happen. Chidi checked his watch again, then slowly raised the handgun. Chioma's breath caught. The world seemed to slow. Every sound became sharper. The rustling leaves, the distant insects, the pounding of her own heartbeat. This was it. The moment she had feared. Vanessa looked away, unable to watch. The guards remained silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. For several seconds, only the moon watched. Then suddenly, a distant sound echoed through the forest. Everyone froze. Chidi frowned. What was that? One of the guards listened carefully. "I don't know." The noise came again. Faint. Far away. But definitely real. An engine. Then another. And another. Multiple vehicles. Approaching quickly. The guards exchanged nervous glances. Vanessa looked alarmed. Chidi's expression darkened instantly. Impossible. The sound grew louder. Much louder. Headlights suddenly appeared between the trees. Far away at first. Then closer. Rapidly closing the distance. Panic erupted. "We've been followed," one guard shouted. The other immediately reached for his weapon. Vanessa stepped backward. Fear flooded her face. Chidi cursed. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. The convoy burst into the clearing seconds later. Tires sprayed dirt everywhere. Doors flew open. Police officers poured from the vehicles. Weapons drawn. Voices shouted simultaneously. "Police! Drop your weapons! Don't move!" The clearing exploded into chaos. Chioma's eyes widened. Relief crashed through her. They had found her. Somehow, they had actually found her. Then she saw him. Obinna. He emerged from the lead vehicle. His face carried an expression she had never seen before. Pure determination. Pure fury. Pure fear. The moment his eyes landed on Chioma, relief flashed across his features. She was alive. Thank God. She was alive. Unfortunately, Chidi saw him too, and panic took over. Everything was collapsing. Everything. Years of planning. Months of deception. All of it. Gone. His gaze shifted toward Chioma, the source of all his problems. The woman who had ruined everything. A dangerous decision formed instantly. If he couldn't escape, at least he could silence her. Forever. Without warning, Chidi spun toward Chioma. The handgun rose. Directly toward her. Several officers shouted. "Gun! Don't do it!" Time slowed. Chioma saw the weapon. Saw his finger tightening on the trigger. Saw death approaching. Then, bang! A gunshot shattered the night. But it didn't come from Chidi. Came from Obinna. The bullet struck Chidi's hand. The weapon flew into the darkness. Chidi screamed. The sound echoed through the trees. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his injured hand. Chaos erupted instantly. Officers rushed forward. The guards attempted to flee. They barely made it 3 steps before being tackled to the ground. Vanessa froze completely. Terror overwhelmed her. Within seconds, officers surrounded her. "Don't move!" She raised her hands immediately. Tears filled her eyes. The fight was over. Meanwhile, Obinna sprinted toward Chioma. Nothing else mattered. Not Chidi. Not the arrests. Not the investigation. Only Chioma. He reached her within seconds. Chioma! Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time all night, she felt safe. Obinna immediately began untying the ropes. His hands trembled. Not from fear. From emotion. The thought of arriving too late had haunted him the entire journey. One more minute, one more second. That was all it might have taken. Finally the ropes fell away. Chioma's legs nearly gave out. Obinna caught her instantly. For several moments neither spoke. The relief was too overwhelming. Then Chioma whispered softly, "You came." Obinna looked at her. His eyes were filled with emotion. "I'll always come." The simple statement nearly broke her. Tears streamed down her face. Not because she was weak. Not because she was frightened. But because for most of her life nobody came. Nobody rescued her. Nobody protected her. She had always been alone. Always. Until now. Nearby, officers secured Chitty in handcuffs. The once confident businessman now looked defeated. Blood stained his injured hand. His expensive clothes were covered in dirt. The image felt strangely symbolic. Years of greed and resentment had finally caught up with him. One officer pulled him to his feet. As they passed nearby, Chitty looked directly at Obinna. Hatred still burned in his eyes. "You always win." Obinna stared at him. The words hurt more than he expected. Because despite everything, Chitty was still family. Or at least he had been. "No." Obinna shook his head. "You lost the moment you chose this path." For the first time, Chitty looked away. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat inside a police vehicle. Completely broken. Her carefully planned future had disappeared. Her relationship, her reputation, her freedom, everything. As officers finished securing the scene, Obinna remained beside Chioma, refusing to leave her side. A paramedic examined her wrists. Fortunately, she wasn't seriously injured. Just exhausted. Emotionally and physically exhausted. Eventually Chief Emmanuel arrived. The moment he saw Chioma, relief flooded his face. "My daughter." He hugged her tightly. The older man's hands trembled. The possibility of losing another person he cared about had terrified him. Chioma returned the embrace. For a moment nobody spoke. Words weren't necessary. The emotions said enough. Nearby, police investigators began documenting evidence. Photographs, statements, witness accounts, everything. Because this night had uncovered far more than a kidnapping. It had exposed an attempted murder conspiracy. A conspiracy that stretched back to the attack on Obinna. And now the truth was finally beginning to surface. As the first signs of dawn appeared on the horizon, the convoy prepared to leave. The nightmare was over, at least for now. Chitty and Vanessa sat in separate police vehicles, both under arrest, both facing consequences. And for the first time since overhearing that conversation in the mansion, Chioma could finally breathe. She glanced toward Obinna. Their eyes met. Neither looked away, because both understood something had changed forever. Not just because he had saved her life. Not just because she had saved his. But because somewhere between danger, friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice, their hearts had begun moving toward something much deeper. Neither was ready to say it yet. But the feeling was there, growing stronger with every passing day. And soon, neither of them would be able to ignore it any longer. The morning after the rescue felt surreal. For Chioma, it was difficult to believe that only a few hours earlier she had been tied to a tree in the middle of a forest, convinced she was about to die. Now she sat inside a comfortable guest suite at the Okafor estate. Safe, alive, protected. Sunlight streamed through the large windows. Birds chirped outside. Everything looked peaceful. Yet her mind remained trapped in the events of the previous night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Chitty raising the gun. She heard the sound of the approaching vehicles. She remembered the overwhelming relief she felt when Obinna appeared. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened. Obinna stepped inside carrying a tray. "Good morning." Chioma smiled faintly. "You brought breakfast?" He placed the tray on a nearby table. "You need to eat." She laughed softly. "You sound like a doctor. After everything you've been through, I'm allowed to worry." The concern in his voice warmed her heart. For a brief moment, neither spoke. They simply looked at each other. The events of the previous night had changed something between them. The friendship still existed. But now there was something deeper beneath it. Something neither was ready to discuss. At least not yet. Obinna sat down. "How are you feeling?" Chioma considered the question. "Tired." "That's understandable." She nodded. Then her expression became serious. "What happens now?" Obinna's face hardened. "Now, the investigation, the arrests, the truth." A great deal had happened overnight, and much more was still to come. "Chitty and Vanessa are being questioned." Chioma looked up. "Have they confessed?" "Not yet." His jaw tightened. "But they will." Several kilometers away, inside police headquarters, the atmosphere was far less peaceful. Chitty sat alone inside an interrogation room. The injury to his hand had been treated and bandaged. But his situation had only grown worse. Much worse. Two detectives sat across from him. A recorder rested on the table. Neither detective appeared intimidated by his family name, or his wealth, or his status. At that moment he was simply a suspect. A very serious suspect. One detective leaned forward. "We've recovered the weapon." Chitty remained silent. "We have witnesses." Still silence. "We have evidence connecting you to the kidnapping." "Nothing." The detective sighed. "This would be easier if you cooperated." A faint smile appeared on Chitty's face. "I want a lawyer." The detective expected that answer. Unfortunately for Chitty, lawyers couldn't erase facts. And facts were beginning to pile up rapidly. Meanwhile, in another interrogation room, Vanessa was falling apart. Unlike Chitty, she wasn't built for pressure. Hours of questioning had exhausted her. Her mascara was smeared. Her eyes were red from crying. The confident woman who had once walked into Chioma's gym was gone. Fear had replaced her confidence. Regret had replaced her arrogance. An investigator placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs, pictures from the forest, images of the vehicle, evidence collected from phones, financial records, communication logs. The investigator looked directly at her. "Vanessa." The woman lowered her head. "We already know what happened." Silence. "We just need you to confirm it." Tears filled Vanessa's eyes. For several moments she struggled to remain composed. Then finally she whispered, "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." The investigator immediately leaned forward. "What wasn't supposed to happen?" And just like that, the wall began to crack. Back at the Okafor estate, Chief Emmanuel sat alone inside his study. The billionaire looked older than usual. Much older. The events of the previous months had taken a toll on him. First the attempt on Obinna's life. Then the kidnapping. Now the possibility that his own stepson was responsible for everything. The thought broke his heart. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in." Obinna entered. For a moment, father and son simply looked at each other. Neither spoke. Both understood the situation. Finally, Chief Emmanuel sighed. "Tell me the truth." Obinna sat down. "What truth? Did you suspect Chitty?" The question lingered between them. Obinna hesitated, then nodded. "A little." His father closed his eyes. "When?" "After the shooting." The billionaire looked surprised. "You never told me." "I wasn't certain." Chief Emmanuel stared out the window. Pain filled his face. "Neither was I." The confession shocked Obinna. His father continued. "There were moments when things didn't add up." He shook his head sadly. "But I kept convincing myself I was wrong." The room fell silent, because the alternative was unbearable. No father wanted to believe his son was capable of murder. No father wanted to imagine that level of betrayal. Yet reality didn't care what people wanted. Reality simply existed, and now it was impossible to ignore. 3 days later, the first major breakthrough arrived. Vanessa confessed. Completely. The news spread quickly through the police department. Detectives immediately recorded her statement. Every detail, every conversation, every secret. By the time she finished, the scope of the conspiracy had become clear. She admitted helping Chitty, admitted knowing about the plot, admitted participating in the kidnapping. Most importantly, she revealed the motive. Greed. and jealousy. The investigators listened carefully. One detective finally asked the question everyone wanted answered. Why? Vanessa stared at the table. For several seconds she remained silent. Then she spoke. Because everything was changing. The detective waited. Obinna was drifting away from me. Bitterness entered her voice. Then Chioma appeared. She laughed sadly. Everyone loved her. The detective frowned. So you helped plan a murder? Tears rolled down her face. When you say it like that, it sounds insane. Because it is insane. Vanessa lowered her head. She couldn't argue with that. The truth was ugly, and now she had to face it. Soon afterward, investigators confronted Chitty with Vanessa's confession. The reaction was immediate. Rage. Pure rage. You idiot! He slammed his fist against the table. The detectives remained calm. The outburst told them everything. One investigator calmly slid another document across the table. What is this? A copy of your father's will. Chitty froze. The color drained from his face. The detective continued. Interesting reading. Silence. The detective pointed towards several highlighted sections. The majority of the family wealth was scheduled to pass to Obinna. The statement struck like a hammer. Years of resentment suddenly became visible. Even without speaking, Chitty's expression revealed everything. The detective leaned forward. This is why you tried to kill him, isn't it? For several seconds, Chitty said nothing. Then something inside him finally broke. Years of anger, years of jealousy, years of bitterness. Everything exploded. Yes, the word echoed through the room. The detectives exchanged glances. The confession had begun. Chitty stood abruptly. He was always the favorite. His voice trembled with emotion. My father gave him everything. The detective remained silent, allowing him to continue. He trusted Obinna. Chitty laughed bitterly. He respected Obinna. The anger intensified. And when I discovered the will, he shook his head. I realized I would always come second. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then the detective asked quietly, So you arranged the attack? Chitty closed his eyes. The fight was gone. The resistance was gone. Only defeat remained. Finally he nodded. The room fell silent. The confession was complete. When the news reached Chief Emmanuel, the billionaire was devastated. He sat alone for nearly an hour, unable to process it, unable to understand how things had gone so wrong. Eventually Chioma found him sitting in the garden. The older man looked exhausted. She approached quietly. Sir. He looked up. A faint smile appeared. My daughter. Chioma sat beside him. For a while neither spoke. Then the chief sighed. I failed him. The statement surprised her. What? Chitty. Pain filled his voice. A father is supposed to guide his children. Chioma listened carefully. I kept thinking money would solve everything. He stared into the distance. But money doesn't teach character. The wisdom in his words struck her deeply. For several moments silence returned. Then Chioma gently placed a hand on his shoulder. This isn't your fault. The older man smiled sadly. Maybe not. His eyes moved toward the horizon. But it still hurts. And it did. More than anyone realized. Several weeks later, formal charges were filed. The announcement dominated national headlines. The public reacted with shock. The wealthy heir, the beautiful fiancée, the attempted murder, the kidnapping, the conspiracy. Every detail captured attention. Television stations covered the story non-stop. Social media exploded with discussion. Many people couldn't believe it. Others were furious. Meanwhile, through all the chaos, Chioma tried to return to normal life. She focused on the gym, focused on healing, focused on moving forward. Yet one thing became increasingly clear. The danger was over. The secrets were exposed. The truth had finally emerged. And for the first time since the night of the shooting, nobody needed to hide anymore. Not Chitty, not Vanessa, not Obinna, not Chioma. The battle had ended. Justice was coming. And as one chapter of their lives closed, another was quietly beginning. A chapter that had nothing to do with betrayal, nothing to do with greed, nothing to do with violence. A chapter centered on healing, hope, and a love that neither Obinna nor Chioma could ignore much longer. The trial began 3 months later. By then, the story had become national news. Every major television station covered it. Newspapers printed daily updates. Social media users debated every detail. People across the country wanted answers. How could a wealthy businessman attempt to murder his own stepbrother? How could a respected socialite become involved in kidnapping? And how had a former homeless orphan become the key witness in one of the country's biggest criminal cases? The courtroom was packed on the first day. Journalists filled the gallery. Reporters crowded outside the courthouse. Security officers stood at every entrance. The atmosphere felt tense, important, historic. Chioma sat quietly beside Obinna. Even after everything they had endured, she still disliked public attention. The cameras, the headlines, the interviews, none of it felt natural. She preferred the gym. She preferred helping people. She preferred a simple life. Unfortunately, the situation had become much bigger than any of them. Across the room sat Chidi. For the first time, he looked vulnerable. The expensive confidence that once surrounded him had disappeared. His tailored suits remained. His wealth remained. But something else was gone. His sense of control. Beside him sat Vanessa. She looked equally defeated. Gone was the proud woman who had once walked into Chioma's gym demanding obedience. Now she looked exhausted, broken, ashamed. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The trial officially began. Over the following weeks, witness after witness took the stand. Police officers testified. Investigators presented evidence. Security experts explained the timeline. Forensic specialists described the attack. The evidence was overwhelming. Every day made the truth harder to deny. Eventually, Chioma was called to testify. The moment her name echoed through the courtroom, silence fell. She walked slowly toward the witness stand. Dozens of eyes followed her. Some curious, some sympathetic, some admiring. Chioma ignored them all. She focused on the judge, on the questions, on the truth. After taking the oath, she sat down. The prosecutor approached. "Please state your name." "Chioma Nwosu." The questioning began. She described the night of the shooting, finding Obinna, stopping the bleeding, taking him to the hospital. Then she described everything that followed. The gym, the friendship, the family gathering, the conversation she overheard, the kidnapping, the forest, every detail. At several points, the courtroom became completely silent. Many people struggled to believe what they were hearing. When Chioma described being tied to a tree, while Chidi pointed a gun at her, several spectators visibly reacted. The story sounded like something from a movie, yet every word was true. When her testimony ended, the prosecutor thanked her. Then came the defense attorney. He stood slowly, confidently, prepared to challenge her. For nearly an hour he asked difficult questions, tried to create doubt, tried to find inconsistencies, tried to weaken her credibility. But Chioma remained calm, honest, consistent. By the end of the cross-examination, the attorney looked frustrated. The truth was stubborn, and Chioma's account never changed. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, Obinna smiled proudly. "You did well." Chioma exhaled deeply. "I never want to do that again." Obinna laughed softly. "Fair enough." The most dramatic moment of the trial came when Chidi himself took the stand. Against his lawyer's advice, against common sense, against everyone's expectations. Yet he insisted. The courtroom became silent as he walked forward. Even the reporters seemed unusually focused. This was the man at the center of everything. The man who had nearly destroyed multiple lives. After taking his seat, he stared straight ahead, expressionless. For several minutes, the questioning remained routine. Then the prosecutor asked the question everyone had been waiting for. "Why did you do it?" The courtroom held its breath. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Chidi laughed. Not loudly, Not happily, just bitterly. The sound made people uncomfortable. He shook his head. You want the truth? Yes. Chidi looked toward Obinna. Years of resentment filled his eyes. Because I was tired. The answer confused many people. Tired of what? Tired of being second. Silence followed. Then the words began pouring out. Years of buried emotions. Years of jealousy. Years of anger. My father loved him. He pointed toward Obinna. He trusted him. His voice grew stronger. He praised him. Several people shifted uncomfortably. He was always proud of him. Chidi laughed bitterly. And no matter what I did, it was never enough. The courtroom listened. Some people felt sympathy. Others didn't, because pain explained actions. It didn't excuse them. Then Chidi revealed the truth that had fueled everything. The will. Immediately the room became quieter. His jaw tightened. When I discovered most of the family fortune was going to Obinna, he paused. Something broke inside me. The confession shocked many people. Not because it was unexpected, but because of how openly he admitted it. Greed, jealousy, resentment, they had consumed him completely. When his testimony ended, even his own lawyer looked defeated. The case was over. Everyone knew it. Several days later, the verdict arrived. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. People crowded every available seat. Television crews waited outside. The entire country seemed to be watching. Chioma sat beside Obinna. Chief Emmanuel sat nearby. His face looked older than usual. The trial had taken a heavy toll on him. Not just emotionally, spiritually. Watching his family collapse had broken something inside him. Yet he still attended every session, every hearing, every moment. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then came the verdict. The judge reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, the confessions, the findings. The courtroom remained silent. Finally, the decision arrived. Chidi was found guilty. Vanessa was found guilty. The sentences were severe. Years in prison. No special treatment. No exceptions. No shortcuts. Justice had spoken. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Some people nodded approvingly. Others looked shocked. Vanessa immediately began crying. The reality finally hit her. Her future had vanished. Everything she once wanted was gone. Meanwhile, Chidi remained silent. Strangely silent. The anger that had defined him for so long seemed exhausted. As officers approached to escort him away, he glanced toward his father. For a brief moment their eyes met. The pain on Chief Emmanuel's face was heartbreaking. Yet Chidi looked away first, unable to face it, unable to face what he had become. As the courtroom emptied, reporters flooded the exits. Questions flew from every direction. Chioma, Obinna, how do you feel? Neither stopped. Neither answered. They simply wanted peace. Later that evening, Chief Emmanuel invited them to dinner. Not a public event. Not a celebration. Just family. The atmosphere felt surprisingly warm. For the first time in months, nobody discussed court dates, or investigations, or criminal charges. Instead, they talked about ordinary things. Life, business, dreams, the future. Halfway through dinner, the chief raised his glass. Everyone looked toward him. I want to thank both of you. Chioma smiled. Sir. No. He interrupted gently. I mean it. His eyes became emotional. Without Chioma, I would have lost my son. The room grew quiet. And without Obinna, I would have lost Chioma. The statement touched both of them deeply. The chief smiled. You saved each other. Neither argued, because it was true. Much later that evening, after dinner ended, Obinna offered to drive Chioma home. The city lights sparkled outside the windows as they traveled through Lagos. For several minutes, neither spoke. The comfortable silence felt familiar. Eventually Chioma looked out the window. It's finally over. Obinna nodded. Yes. How do you feel? He thought carefully. Relieved. Then he smiled. And sad. Chioma understood. No matter what Chidi had done, he had still been family. Betrayal always hurt, especially when it came from someone you loved. When they reached her house, Obina parked the vehicle. Neither seemed eager to end the evening. Finally, Chioma spoke. "Thank you." Obina looked confused. "For what?" "For finding me." The memory of the forest immediately returned. The fear, the darkness, the relief. Obina's expression softened. "I was never going to stop looking." The sincerity in his voice made her heart race. For several seconds, they simply stared at each other. Something had changed. Again. The friendship that once felt simple no longer felt simple at all. The feelings were becoming impossible to ignore, impossible to deny. Eventually Chioma smiled. "Good night. Good night." She stepped out of the vehicle, then paused, turning back toward him. For one brief moment their eyes met. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The emotions were obvious. The connection was obvious. The only question remaining was who would admit it first. As Chioma walked toward her front door, she couldn't stop smiling. And inside the vehicle, Obina sat quietly for several moments before driving away. Both carried the same realization. The danger was over. The lies were over. The trials were over. A new chapter was beginning. And this chapter had nothing to do with criminals, conspiracies, or betrayal. It had everything to do with two people who had saved each other's lives. Two people whose friendship had grown into something much deeper. Two people standing on the edge of love. Neither knew exactly what the future would bring. But for the first time, the future looked bright. Very bright indeed. 3 months after the trial ended, life finally began to feel normal again. For the first time in nearly a year, Chioma woke up without fear. No investigations. No court appearances. No threats. No dangerous secrets. Just peace. Real peace. The kind she had dreamed about during countless difficult nights. One bright Saturday morning, Chioma arrived at her gym earlier than usual. As she walked through the front doors, employees greeted her warmly. "Good morning, boss." She smiled. The title still felt strange sometimes. Even now, there were moments when she stood inside the fitness center and struggled to believe it was hers. Not long ago, she had slept inside abandoned buildings. Now she owned one of the most successful gyms in the city. Life had changed beyond recognition. Yet despite all her success, one thing occupied her thoughts more than anything else. Obina. Over the past several months, their friendship had grown stronger than ever. They spoke daily, visited each other often, supported each other through difficult moments. Everyone around them noticed the connection. Everyone except the two people involved. Or perhaps they noticed it and simply refused to acknowledge it. Either way, the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. That afternoon, Obina arrived at the gym. As usual, the moment Chioma saw him, she smiled. And the moment Obina saw her, he smiled too. Several employees exchanged knowing looks. One trainer quietly whispered to another, "They're definitely in love." The second trainer nodded. Obviously, neither Chioma nor Obina heard the conversation. If they had, both would have become extremely embarrassed. Obina approached her office. "Busy?" "A little." "Good." She raised an eyebrow. "Good. Because I need to steal you for a few hours." Chioma laughed. "That's not suspicious at all." He grinned. "Trust me." Those words immediately made her nervous. Every time someone said trust me, trouble usually followed. Still, she agreed. An hour later, they were driving along the coastline. The ocean stretched endlessly beside them. Warm sunlight reflected across the water. The scenery was beautiful, peaceful. Eventually, Obina parked near a secluded beach. Chioma looked around curiously. "Why are we here?" Instead of answering, Obina took a deep breath. Suddenly, he looked nervous. Very nervous. Chioma noticed immediately. Her heart began beating faster. Something was happening. Something important. For several moments, neither spoke. The waves crashed softly nearby. Seagulls drifted overhead. The entire world seemed unusually quiet. Then Obina finally turned toward her. "Chioma." The way he said her name made her stomach flutter. "Yes." He smiled softly. You know, when I woke up in the hospital, everyone kept telling me about the woman who saved my life. Chioma listened quietly. I remember thinking I needed to thank her. His smile widened. I never imagined she would completely change my life. Emotion filled his voice. And suddenly Chioma knew. She knew exactly where this conversation was going. Yet hearing it still made her heart race. Obinna continued. You believed in me when things were difficult. He paused. You stood beside me when my family was falling apart. His eyes never left hers. You risked your life for me. Tears began forming in Chioma's eyes. Then Obinna slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Her breath caught. The world seemed to stop. Slowly, Obinna got down on one knee. Chioma! The tears immediately spilled over. Nearby, the ocean waves continued rolling onto the shore. The moment felt perfect, beautiful, unforgettable. You saved my life twice. She laughed through her tears. Twice? Yes. His eyes softened. The first time was when you carried me to the hospital. He opened the box. A stunning ring sparkled inside. The second time was when you showed me what real love looks like. Chioma covered her mouth. Overwhelmed. Emotional. Speechless. Obinna's voice trembled slightly. I love you. The words hit her heart with incredible force. Because she loved him too. She had loved him for a long time. Long before she admitted it to herself. Long before she understood it. Long before she was ready. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face. For several seconds she couldn't speak. Then finally she nodded. Yes. A huge smile spread across Obinna's face. Yes. Yes. He laughed. Then laughed again. The joy was impossible to contain. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Chioma felt as though she were dreaming. A beautiful dream. One she never wanted to end. Months later, preparations for the wedding were underway, and the entire city seemed excited. The story of Chioma and Obinna had captured people's hearts. The orphan who became a hero. The police officer whose life she saved. The friendship that became love. Felt like something from a movie. Reporters constantly requested interviews. Wedding planners worked tirelessly. Designers presented gowns. Florists created arrangements. Every detail mattered. Chief Emmanuel personally oversaw much of the planning. For him, the wedding represented more than a celebration. It represented healing. After everything the family had endured, they finally had something joyful to focus on. One evening, while reviewing plans, the chief looked at Chioma and smiled. You know something? What? You remind me of Obinna's mother. The statement surprised her. Chief Emmanuel's eyes became distant. She was kind. He smiled softly. Strong too. Emotion filled his voice. I think she would have loved you. The words touched Chioma deeply. Thank you. The chief nodded. No. His smile widened. Thank you. Finally, the wedding day arrived. And it was magnificent. Guests traveled from across the country. Business leaders attended. Government officials attended. Friends attended. Employees from the gym attended. Even some of the nurses who had met Chioma in the hospital attended. Everyone wanted to witness the celebration. The church looked breathtaking. Flowers decorated every aisle. Beautiful music filled the air. Excitement buzzed throughout the crowd. Then the doors opened, and Chioma appeared. The entire church seemed to pause. She looked stunning. The elegant white gown fit her perfectly. Her smile radiated happiness. Tears immediately filled several eyes, including Chief Emmanuel's. As Chioma walked slowly down the aisle, memories flooded her mind. The orphanage, the abandoned building, the nights she slept hungry, the loneliness, the struggles, the pain, every difficult moment, every hardship, every obstacle, and somehow, every step had led her here, to this moment, to this life, to this love. At the altar, Obinna stood waiting. The moment he saw her, his eyes became emotional. He couldn't stop smiling. Neither could she. When she finally reached him, they simply stared at each other. No words, just love. pure and undeniable. The ceremony began. The pastor spoke about faith, about perseverance, about destiny. Many guests quietly wiped away tears, because everyone knew the journey these two had taken, and everyone understood how remarkable it truly was. Eventually, the moment arrived. The vows. Obinna spoke first. His voice remained steady, but the emotion was obvious. I promise to love you. He smiled. To support you. His eyes shone. To protect you. A few people laughed softly. The police officer couldn't resist including that part. And to spend the rest of my life proving how grateful I am that you walked into mine. Chioma cried openly. When her turn came, she took a deep breath, then smiled. I spent most of my life believing I was alone. The church became silent. But you changed that. Her voice trembled. You showed me what family looks like. She looked directly into his eyes. And you showed me what love feels like. Several guests wiped away tears. Even Chief Emmanuel openly cried. The pastor finally smiled. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The crowd erupted with applause. Cheers filled the church. Laughter mixed with tears. And then Obinna kissed his bride. The celebration afterward lasted for hours. Music filled the reception hall. Guests danced. Stories were shared. Memories were celebrated. For the first time in a very long time, happiness completely overshadowed pain. Late that evening, after most guests had departed, Chioma and Obinna stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. The night sky sparkled above them. Thousands of lights stretched across the horizon. The view was breathtaking. For several moments, neither spoke. They simply enjoyed the moment. Eventually, Obinna wrapped an arm around her. Do you ever think about the old days? Chioma smiled softly. Sometimes. Do you miss them? She considered the question carefully, then shook her head. I don't miss the suffering. Obinna nodded. That answer made sense. But then Chioma continued. I don't regret it either. He looked at her. Why? She smiled. Because every struggle brought me here. Her eyes drifted toward the city. If my life had been different. She squeezed his hand. I might never have met you. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Obinna kissed her forehead. And together they watched the city lights sparkle below. The orphan who once had nothing now had everything she had ever dreamed of. A home, family, purpose, a future. And beside her stood the man she loved. The man whose life she saved. The man who saved hers in return. Their journey had begun with a gunshot on a rainy night. But it ended with love. And as they stood together beneath the stars, both knew one thing with absolute certainty. The best chapter of their story was only just beginning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel.